Hello, thank you so much for joining us for the third in the Enterprising Impact Conversation series. Today we're going to be talking about how you can connect the dots. What do we mean by that? Well, it's how do you combine the elements of a successful research career? We've got three fantastic guests to share their thoughts and ideas on that. And we also really want to hear from you. You're not our audience, you're our participants, if you like, participants. This is a conversation, so do say hello. Introduce yourselves in the chat on Zoom, and also as we go through the conversation, we hear from our speakers, do put your own thoughts and comments and questions into the chat, and we'll have a nice sort of 25-minute panel discussion involving everybody at the end as well. So I'm sharing my screen. Charlotte, can you see everything okay?
You're not showing your screen at the moment, Belinda.
Let me go back to that. Hang on, bear with me one moment. Fantastic. So as I say, this is the third in the Enterprising Impact Conversation series. We're delighted to be here and to have you with us. The conversation series is for social science researchers for a number of universities. And we want to make every conversation really, really impactful for everybody who chooses to join us. It's all about exploring new ways to help you create greater social value from your research. It's about helping you build your career by supporting knowledge exchange and impact with enterprise. And also it's about connecting you with special advisors and helping you identify really practical next steps that you can take on this journey. You can see the full 5 conversation series and a number of deep dives that support the series on Eventbrite using that bit.ly link, and we will put that link into the chat later on. We also record, as you know, we're recording today's session. We record all of these sessions, and you can see all of those on YouTube. Again, there's the bit.ly link there. So EI-conversations-videos, that bit.ly link will take you to those, so you can check out any conversations that you've missed. And if you can't make the next 2 conversations, you can always find those on YouTube as well. So today's speakers, as I said, we've got 3 fantastic speakers. So Dr. Norbert Morawetz, who's an associate professor in entrepreneurship at Henley Business School. We've got Dr. Hibbah Osei-Kwasi, who is a postdoctoral researcher in public health nutrition from the University of Sheffield. And also we've got Professor Mark Reed, who is a professor of rural entrepreneurship at Scotland's Rural College, and also CEO of Fast Track Impact and an author on this subject as well. So I know he's going to be sharing a lot of that with you today. So welcome to our 3 speakers. Throughout their talks, they're going to be answering a number of questions and also drawing on their own experience and their own stories, their own background and the work they do. The questions they're going to be exploring are what motivated them to think about business ideas and how does this relate to their research? Which commercial models are they using and why? Their thoughts on how research impact and knowledge exchange can be managed within the challenges of a normal working week. Also, how thinking about how a researcher can respond to government audits whilst not losing sight of their own goals and their own motivations. And also then thinking lastly about how a research organisation can support researchers to manage these competing demands. So there's going to be a lot going on in today's conversation. So I know I'm really looking forward to it. So as I say, we are hearing from 3 speakers, and then we have got about a 25-minute conversation or panel discussion, but we'd really love to hear from you. So do introduce yourselves in the chat, do add your thoughts, ideas and questions, and we'll be tackling those as we go along and then in the panel discussion as well. So that's it from now. For me, from now, we're going to first hand over to Norbert, Dr. Norbert Morawetz. Thank you so much for joining us. Norbert, I know you're on mute at the moment.
Hello, hi. Thank you very much, Charlotte, and for this introduction. That's great. So yeah, I'll guess I'll make a start. You've outlined key questions here, so I'll also share my screen. I've got a couple of slides to talk you through on this as well. I hope this comes across. Yeah, does this work? Great stuff. So yeah, connecting the dots. And how to combine elements of a successful, which I put a question mark against research career on here, and I'll talk about why there's a question mark here a little bit later. So I'm Norbert. I'm, as been mentioned, an associate professor in entrepreneurship at Henley Business School. And if you're in entrepreneurship, then maybe even more than in other professions, if you're in this discipline, you kind of like feel like you also have to practice what you teach. So I guess your affinity with starting a business or thinking about what else you can do with your research is pretty close to your heart, because ultimately you also stand in the classroom and you're talking to people, to students about this. So you better have some stories to tell about your own endeavors in this respect as well. So for me, I would say even coming out of my discipline, thinking about startups has always been a key thing right from the start of my career. So when I started in academia, actually sort of as a lecturer after my PhD, one of the first projects, so my first business that I did was something called Team Match. And that was really solving a teaching problem that I had, where I was leading a very large course at a university, over 1,100 students. And I wanted to organize them into teams, but then very often with group work, you end up sort of with failing groups and lots of complaints. So I thought like, oh, what can we do? And I thought, okay, maybe we can draw in some of those algorithms that people use in dating, where they match you up with someone that maybe you're a good fit with. And so I built this thing called Team Match, which was basically matching people into teams and then giving them a bit of insight about their team as well to smooth them over into the teamwork. And I really just did this initially for myself, but then a lot of people said like, oh, can we use this as well? And ultimately it's sort of like spread as an open educational resource to about 80 universities, and with pretty good results from this. And that kind of like also was my entry into the world of technology entrepreneurship a bit. So I have been dabbling in developing learning technology ever since, and it has become an important part of my career as well. The sort of second experience right off that, or kind of like in parallel to that, was then actually doing a spin out from a university as a lecturer there, and that was called Cuppla. Was a collaboration platform, not unlike what we have with Teams or Slack today, but obviously years before that. So it was quite innovative, and I remember at the time talking to Microsoft about it in a pitch competition, and the lady from Microsoft saying, "Oh no, open collaboration, that's not a thing. We've got SharePoint." And we're quite happy with that. That was before they sort of like I went down the Teams route. So it was a pretty good space at the time. I got a really good insight into tech startup and so on, and got some grant funding of the Technology Strategy Board in these days, and also managed to secure some investment from the university at the time. And but ultimately, that actually proved to be the downfall of this particular venture, because the way, as I wasn't super experienced as an entrepreneur at the time, otherwise my alarm bells would have rang a bit louder. But sort of like what I found out was that having raised from the university was kind of like ultimately downfall of this business, because the decision-making process through that bureaucracy that was coming into the business ultimately slowed it down significantly, and we couldn't really accelerate to the degree that we needed to, or get the executive decisions made in order to pursue funding effectively and so on. And ultimately, I would really squarely put the failure of this venture down to not having considered these governance structures in the right way in terms of setting this up. So that was a big lesson for me. I certainly learned a lot from this, and also in terms of like how to consider going about this going forward. So then I've done a couple of smaller projects as well, and I'm picking out this one here specifically, just very briefly, a project which is called Socratio, where I was trying to use machine learning techniques to enhance peer learning. So in order to increase the amount of feedback that people get on their work. Really interesting project, and also got some awards there from UKI, Innovate UK, on data insights competition and so on. But ultimately, this was one of those projects where everybody thought like, oh, this is a great idea, but ultimately it didn't go further into terms of like really becoming a usable product or resource, and it remained at the concept stage, really, until maybe a bit later, and I'll talk about that as well. And then my main project, which I'm still heavily involved with, is at the moment a platform called Potentially, which is an employability and skills development platform. And at the moment, this is about in 20 universities in the UK, delivering co-curricular skills awards and also employability and enterprise programs to thousands of students. So last year, about 150,000 learners on the platform. And quite importantly, it's also, got a partnership there with JISC. And maybe you've come across this, maybe not. But JISC AC UK, if you don't know them, they're an innovation body for the higher education sector. Their claim to fame is that they're also delivering the internet backbone for all of the universities. And so I'm working with them for a couple of years now, also with the learning platform here. And they've got something called the Digital Discovery Tool, which is a skills assessment also for academic staff, where they can go through and assess their digital skills level, and then they get recommended a couple of resources. And so far, about 26,000, I guess, academics and another 20,000 students have completed this, over 100 institutions, and it's going to be rolled out from September to 300 UK higher education and further education institutions. So we'll grow further. A really exciting project and great stuff to be involved in. And of the same, this is the last thing here to sort of kick us off in terms of giving a bit of what I'm doing. During the pandemic, I also used this platform, the Potentially platform, which I developed to run a social enterprise. And that social enterprise was called Class of 2020. And it was really kind of like a free upskilling initiative for graduates who are graduating into the worst job market in decades. And so we thought, like, okay, my students, I had them, was looking after them for 3 years on the degree. What can we do to help them? And here, basically, what we did was reach out to corporates and ask them, hey, you've created all this material for your graduate recruitment programs that are now not hiring. Would you mind sharing that and make that available for all students? And a phenomenal number of businesses said yes to that, and sort of gave us those resources. And then we sort of like built a team of 55 volunteers that then used those resources and built it for free on the learning platform and supported over 1,300 young people, and also got some very good national press for this project. And that was kind of like it was a purely social enterprise initiative, but very rewarding to do. And it really brought a lot of the skills together that I have been developing over years in this space. So that's kind of like a quick overview of a couple of entrepreneurial projects that I have started and then I led. And so now let's see how I can, if I can bring this back to also how we can connect those dots to combine them into a successful research career. And here, I guess, like the really important first point that I would make is, if you want to connect the dots, then the first thing that you have to do is you have to create the dots. All right. So because otherwise you've got nothing to connect with. And I would say I would have had no clue that when I tried to do something, when I tried to do team match, that years later I would be ending up doing this Class of 2020 project, or these learning platforms or other things in between. You wouldn't know, right? The important thing is that at some point you say, okay, I've got a piece of research and I've maybe got an opportunity to do something with it, and then you actually make a start from it, and pretty much everything else then develops from that. So it is that starting point and doing something about it that really then years later on brings things together. So I think, like, before you even think about how you can connect the dots, the important thing is that you start to create dots. And on that, I would also say, I mean, this is if you're in entrepreneurship, you know this anyway. But for those of you who might not be in entrepreneurship, very often this is about the pivot. It's about changing direction, trying out something, learning from what you're doing, and then changing your direction. And certainly I've done that a number of times. And it is quite fun, really doing this, and quite a surprising learning journey. So quite happy with that. Then maybe years later, you'll be invited to a session like this, like I'm invited here today, to share some of my insights, which you might find relevant or not. But so what is it about connecting the dots then? I mean, I do look back sometimes and so think, oh, well, this was quite interesting how things have developed. You can only see it now. Of course, only something that you can see in retrospect. And I think what's apparent, though, then is even maybe to a degree more than what you can do in a research career is that it is about your own personal journey. So this is entrepreneurship really is kind of like also what you care about, and so ultimately you have to measure the success of this also on why you're doing things and what motivates you to be in academia, to be in research, or maybe to do an entrepreneurial project. So it might be strongly about impact, and this series is also called Enterprising Impact, and certainly that's been a key motivation for me throughout this whole thing. So I like to do things that make an impact, and I could see the impact of the things that I was doing with these entrepreneurial projects, and ultimately you're in control, that you can shape them and you can make that impact happen, and that's very rewarding. If you're doing it purely with a view towards getting a promotion or doing maybe something for the ref or the TEF or getting other funding, then things are a little bit trickier, because you have to work your way a little bit around the system. And so one of the second questions that sort of was thrown up here was, how can you make this practically work within your normal working week? And the answer to that is not particularly straightforward, because very few institutions have got a framework on how to do this or how to enable academics for this. The key thing is that if you are engaging in entrepreneurial activity, what it does to you is that you get better at working around systems, and also you get a little bit better at maybe striking deals with your head of department and so on. And in terms of like also selling what you're doing, you get a bit better on this. So those are valuable skills that are beneficial for your career in any case. But I mean, in my own experience, I have so far not been at an institution that had a very good structure to enable this sort of activities. And that means that yes, you will likely have to initially, when you start something, do this out of your normal work load and work arrangements, and then build a bit of momentum, and then I guess build a case with your head of department or line manager around this as an academic. In sort of the REF, REF Research Excellence Framework exercise, there is this 25% that is currently allocated towards impact case studies. And I think this is a worthwhile point to consider as a researcher. So every institution, I don't know how familiar you are with the Research Excellence Framework, but impact case studies matter a lot to institutions. And typically, for example, at my institution at Henley, Henley Business School, which is part of the University of Reading, we have got no shortage of very top research at Henley Business School. But we do have a shortage of impact case studies, or impact case studies, let's say, are in demand because they count ultimately more than top journals. So if you're considering on how you can make this count for your career, then REF impact case studies is one very viable avenue how you can bring it back into your academic career, and you also should be able to get some agreement from this from your departments. What else do I want to say? I guess like I do also have one warning sort of to put out here, and that is actually if you are successful. So what I, for example, didn't necessarily understood at the start of my journey was that if you're starting a successful entrepreneurial project, then this is like a living being thing. And rather than, let's say, where you write an article and you write the article and you submit it to your journal and then it gets published and then you're done with it. If you start a project, and it's being used out there in the real world, then it's a bit more difficult to walk away from it. And it also doesn't, if it ultimately gets to a point where you're employing people or people are working on this, then you can't as easily take a break from it than from writing that article where you can go back after 10 weeks and maybe do a little bit more work on it. So it's a bit different from your typical academic work in that it's more continuous than the typical academic project is. But if you are up for this, then you're in for a very hugely rewarding journey in terms of shaping it. And finally, kind of like last question that was on here was in terms of like how can research organizations better enable and support researchers in this. And here we're starting to put some thoughts together, and actually I'm quite happy that I'm part of a project that I'm also leading with Sussex on this topic as part of the Aspect AC UK network. Lorna, hands also on the call here today, is a key project partner on this. And here we've got a specific project, and it's called the Apple project, Academic Promotion Pathways Linked to Entrepreneurship. And this is a research project where we're trying to look at how we can help academics make this count for their promotion pathways, but also how can institutions get better at enabling their academics specifically for this topic. So watch this space and also get in touch with me or with Lorna on this, because this is a really interesting project, and hopefully the aim of this would be to put a toolkit together for our universities and also research councils to make a change in this direction and make it easier for the next generation of innovators coming through. And there's a second project as well, which looks at finance, which is also a huge topic, of course, because if you're doing anything entrepreneurial, you want to get some initial seed funding for these things as well. And again, Aspect is doing a phenomenal job of trying to put things together. And there's a second project that I'm also involved in that looks specifically at supporting people who come from shape disciplines, so social sciences, humanities, and the arts, with some funding to get their projects kickstarted. So if any of this is interesting to you, then do reach out to me as well, or ask me some questions. And yeah, that's it for me, for my first party. Thank you.
Norbert, thank you so much for sharing that. So much richness there. And I can see some comments and thoughts in the chat already. So I'll make sure that we come to those. But Norbert, do feel free to reply to anything in the chat that's easy to reply to at this point. Enough from me. I'm going to hand over to Hibbah. Hibbah, I know you've got some slides and you're on mute as well at the moment.
Yes.
Fantastic. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Belinda. Just going to share my slides now. No, but that was a fascinating talk. Thank you. I learned a lot from it myself.
I've made lots of notes as well. That's great. Thanks, Hibbah.
Yeah, and I feel really honored to be part of this discussion, because I'm really relatively new, and to have to be a panelist with Norbert and Mark, I'm really honored, and I thank the organizers for inviting me. Can you see my slide all right, please? Yes, okay. Yes, so as Belinda introduced, my name is Hibbah. I'm a postdoctoral researcher at the University of Sheffield, background in public health nutrition, but currently with the geography department of the University of Sheffield. I'm going to talk you through a social enterprise called Sahara Nutrition. I'm going to start with my motivation and how this is linked to my research. Now, as an early career researcher, my long-term career goal is to become a leading researcher in behavior change and when it comes to nutrition for people of African origin. Now, to help me achieve this aim, I pursued a PhD that explored dietary behaviors and determinants of dietary behaviors among ethnic minority groups in Europe. But then I did a lot of primary data collection amongst African migrants in Greater Manchester. My current postdoctoral researcher built on these findings from my PhD. And I've published quite a bit from this work, my PhD, my postdoc work, and these works are being cited by researchers working in this area. But then I asked myself a couple of times, I did research with African people, African migrants, and I've published. I've been to so many conferences. I've shared my findings at these conferences. Question that kept bugging me was, how do these research papers impact the African migrants? I go to them all the time and I keep going back to them to ask them questions, to talk to them. And I'm like, really, I'm sharing my findings all over the world, publishing papers, but I could not really see how this was influencing the people that I was doing the research with, okay? And I didn't have the answers to this. I mean, I knew I wanted to do something for the African community, especially in Greater Manchester where I lived. I just didn't know how to do this. And then an opportunity came to my department, and I'm happy to say that this is associated with what Norbert mentioned, because this success program is now rebranded as Aspect. You know, so 2.5 years ago, there was this advert in my email that said, do you have a research idea and do you want to turn it into a social enterprise? I saw it just 2 days before the deadline. So I quickly put that, because of course I had used research, I just didn't know how to turn it into a business idea. So I drafted this, I shared it with a colleague, we submitted it, and then I got shortlisted. It was the first of its kind, a pilot program to help social scientists turn their research ideas into an enterprise. So I got shortlisted. We're provided with, that was just at the beginning of the pandemic, so we couldn't meet face-to-face. We had a 3-day intensive training, and then afterwards we had training for a period of about 8 months, but you know, not every week, every now and then we were given mentors to help us actually bring our ideas into reality, to actually start a business using our research ideas. And this is what led to what is known today as Sahara Nutrition. So what is Sahara Nutrition? Yes, Sahara Nutrition is delivering the impact side of my research together with my colleagues. You know, so our research focuses on nutrition, lifestyle behaviors of African migrants in Europe, but we're focusing more on the UK. And the team comprises of registered nutritionists, dietitians, public health experts, all of us of African origin. You know, we come together, we go to the community, ask them of their needs, you know, and then based on the research we've done, we engage them, we deliver talks, and we did this for more than 18 months with no funding whatsoever. You know, people were willing to give back. And so we did this for like 18 months, and we are still doing this. Now, in terms of what model, commercial model, we had to speak to so many people, you know, other people who have these kinds of organizations, social enterprises. And then we finally decided on a CIC, community interest company. The main reason was because, first of all, it was easier to set up. It seemed very simple to operate, especially as compared to a charity. You know, the idea that you have your directors and your members, and that was complete. So it really seemed like it was the easiest model to use, but also because it confers a clear commitment to a communal cause. And we really wanted to give back to the community. The third reason was also because it was quicker to set up as compared to a charity. So it made sense to go for a CIC. And so finally, well, after about 2 years, we only got this registered at the beginning of this year as a social enterprise, a CIC to be specific. Now, next question says, how practically can research impact and knowledge exchange be managed within your normal working week? For me, this is a huge challenge. Myself, my colleagues, this is a huge challenge, and I'll explain why. So at the time, the reason why it took a while for us to register was also because I had to have discussions with the head of our IP. I'm on a fixed term contract at the University of Sheffield as a postdoctoral researcher. And so I thought about who owned the IP and all that, you know. So we had this discussion, and the university said, the head of IP said they recognized that Sahara Nutrition was based upon my research knowledge. You know, so on that basis, they were giving me the freedom to create this as a sole business, you know, and all that. But then the downside was that apart from acknowledging that I did all my research at the University of Sheffield, I couldn't co-brand it with the University of Sheffield because, yes, I was going to leave at some point. I actually have a job offer somewhere else, you know. So this has become a challenge because what it means is that we always have to work outside office hours, evenings, you know, weekends, and we are not too sure if this counts yet. I'm not too sure yet. They are interested in me reporting all the activities we are doing. So on those bases, it is challenging. It's really a challenge for us. However, the good news for me is that I've had a permanent role offer at the University of Loughborough. And as part of that role, it's clearly stated in the job that there were 3 things we were expecting. So teaching, research, and enterprise. So unlike my current role where, I'm still not clear exactly where this fits, I'm starting this job in a few weeks' time, well, in July, and I'm looking forward to a bit more structure because I want to believe that they might have a framework as to how this really fits into everything. So yes, that's what I can say about that. Now, with regards to responding to government audits, again, and Norbert, that's why I said I learned a lot from Norbert, because I'm relatively new here. And what I can say is that for me, the biggest motivation has been to give back to the community. After doing research within our communities for close to a decade, we recognize the issues, we know the problems, and then, we have findings. So our main motivation is to support our community. So documenting, or responding to government reps to me is secondary. But then I also realized that, I recognize that it is important. So a few weeks ago, I had a meeting with one of our impact managers to ask her how to go about it. Because of where we came from, the motivation with which we started this, we were not thinking about it in those lines. We just wanted to support our community. So she showed me what to do. And so we are now learning, just documenting everything. But we are not doing it because of the ref. It's our motivation, it's not the ref, but we are doing the documentation alongside. And we hope that these things we are doing would satisfy the government. But even if it doesn't, we get a lot of sense of fulfillment. It's so rewarding what we are doing in the community and the impact it's making in people's lives that, hopefully it will count. Hopefully it would count. It could also just be because I'm relatively new in here, and hopefully Norbert and Mark might provide some advice in this area when we get to the discussion. My thoughts on how research organizations can better enable and support researchers. Norbert said a lot, but again, recognizing the important role social enterprises play as a tool for impact, allocating time for researchers. I'm really looking forward to my new role. I'm hoping that there might be some time, so that it doesn't always have to be outside of office hours, and making it count as work targets and outputs. So I wrote that when Norbert mentioned that they were trying to develop something to support institutions, and universities to be able to make these things count towards promotion and other things. So yeah, really looking forward to some of these things to support people like us who have just started and are really working hard towards making an impact in the community, an impact beyond publications. I just wanted to show this. I didn't say much about, okay, so for the first time, we had a funding, a small pot of funding from the community to support. We did a needs assessment in Greater Manchester and asked them, what can we do to, we asked them a number of questions, and based on the responses, we developed an intervention, 6 months intervention, and we had some funding, community-based funding, small pot of money. And we did this very intensive intervention on, there were over 100 people on a WhatsApp platform. We met weekly, and this is just one of the feedback, just 3 weeks into the project. So this person says, just after about 3 weeks into the program, my energy levels improved significantly. My mood changed. I felt happier, and my family confirmed this. I heard others in the platform confirm that their energy levels had gone up too. That is what even gave me the confidence to find a job. I have learned a lot on nutrition. I'm not reading the whole thing, but I just wanted to highlight, number of people who really didn't need to be on benefits. They just needed a bit of support, But yeah, just after we started providing this support to them, some of them, were like, we feel better. And so we've decided to look for jobs. And for me, this is really, it makes what I do worthwhile when I see people share. And we have lots and lots of testimonies like that from the group that we are supporting. Apart from this, as part of that intervention we did, we called it the Sahara Total Lifestyle Challenge. So it was we wanted people to change their lifestyle, but we made it a challenge. So we challenged people to walk 10,000 steps every day, and we were in a group where we could see each other's steps. So, you know, you had to, nobody wanted not to be seen as being inactive, you know, so people were walking and were sharing what we were eating, because a lot of the time from nutritional profession, when you ask people to tell you what they've eaten, they, you know, there's all this reported bias. So we ask people to, on a daily basis, share their photos of what they are eating. And then we were supporting them on right portion sizes, you know. So yes, people improved their vegetable intake significantly. And these, you know, we have a report on all the changes that people said they had never been able to make throughout their entire, and these are not young people, adults 50, 60, who for the first time were making these little changes to their lifestyle. And then finally, before we ended the project, we asked for volunteers to train as community ambassadors. Yes, we have diabetes champions, but we don't have lifestyle or nutrition ambassadors, you know. So we went like, how many of you want to be trained? And we had a number of them. This is just a screenshot from our training, who were willing to take the learnings from what we had taught to their families and their networks. So we provided them with a training. And again, some of the challenges, we're still trying to see if we can get a nutrition society or, you know, all those to kind of recognize these people, so that hopefully this could be something we can do for other communities. So yes, this is it for Sahara Nutrition. These are just posters of some of the talks. I forgot to mention that in trying to connect the dots, because of this challenge of not knowing exactly where we fit, we work a lot with community organizations, and that has facilitated the work we do. So this here is called the Caribbean and Health Network. We work a lot with them. Every Tuesday, we have a nutrition and lifestyle session, but we don't have to organize. They do the thing, and we just share our knowledge and support people. And that has been helpful, you know, because as a startup organization, we really are still learning. But because we try to collaborate with all these community organizations, it has pushed us, facilitated what we're doing a lot. And we are already seeing the impact it's having on people. So I'll end here and happy to take some questions at the end.
Hibbah, thank you so much. That was such a great introduction to your work. I've really enjoyed that. And I think it's really testament to Norbert was saying in his talk, at the end of his talk, that, you know, research impact is a living and breathing thing that continues. And I think, you know, the stories that you were sharing really brings that to life about the impact that you're having in the community. So thank you so much. And I know there's some great comments in the chat. So I'm going to hand over to our last speaker, who's Professor Mark Reed, Professor of Rural Entrepreneurship from Scotland's Rural College, and also CEO of Fast Track Impact. So yeah, looking forward to hearing more from you, Mark.
Great, thank you very much. It's a pleasure. So I'll speak for no more than 10 minutes to make sure we've got time for some discussion. And I should say, by way of introduction, that unlike Norbert, who has been out of business school most of his career, and Hibbah, whose role in Loughborough includes enterprise as an expectation, until my new role, where there is this expectation of entrepreneurship, I've always been in schools that don't naturally do business or enterprise, starting with ecology, then environment, geography, planning, and agriculture. So kind of less integrated into the DNA of these kinds of departments. And I hope that as a result, what I'm going to say will resonate, whether or not you are naturally in an environment that expects enterprise. Now, for me, the original place from which I started was my PhD, and I was studying impact in my PhD in the Kalahari desert many years ago. But I really wanted to walk the talk and actually generate more impact from my research on impact. And so to try and share these lessons about what works, my first step was that I needed to go beyond the kind of case study work that I'd been doing until then, to try and generate some more generalizable lessons about what might work in quite different contexts. And so my colleagues and I applied for some ESRC funding to do some both empirical and theoretical work. And in our pathway to impact, when they were a thing, we said that we would then turn our findings into a handbook and a training course. And so the handbook, I can put a PDF of this for anyone who's interested into the chat, has now been published, and the company is Fast Track Impact. And since spinning out in 2015, we've trained over 10,000 researchers in over 200 organizations in at least 55 countries around the world. Now, when I started, I was leading an environmental research centre. I had a crazy workload. The idea of setting up a company terrified me. I had no idea where to start. However, Anna Attlee was the postdoc on the ESRC project that had generated this evidence, and she had already set up her own community interest company. Now, someone was asking in the chat, what is a community interest company? Effectively, this is a company that exists to give back to a community. It is not allowed to make profit. So it's a form of not-for-profit company. And so I asked her if she might mentor me. So we kind of turned the tables, and she started mentoring me in business. And we started trialing what became Fast Track Impact for 2 years within her community interest company as a low risk way of just trying some things out in a way that hopefully wouldn't go too badly wrong. Now, the challenge of where I am now and where I have been since spinning out the company in 2015 is that I've had a full-time job alongside trying to run my company. And until my current job, I've had a full teaching load alongside that, as well as expectations around my research. And one of the common things, and a question here directly to Norbert, I'm interested to see how it works out there. But outside of business schools, certainly the expectation is if you start a spin-out company or take on some major charity role, then we expect you to now go part-time. But there's something about this that doesn't sit right with me. If we as institutions say that we value impact, that this is part of our DNA, this University of Sheffield, for example, where Hibbah comes from, has this in its original charter. It exists for impact. And if that is the case, then shouldn't this be an integral part of what we do? And so what I've increasingly done is, rather than apologize for all the time I'm spending on my company or the charity role that I play with the conservation charity, I started selling this to my leaders, to successive people at job interviews, to say, if you get me, you come, I come with ready-made impact in the form of my own company and this charity role that will enable me to link my research to impact and integrate this into my teaching. And this has worked. In fact, the job that I've got now, I have it written into my contract. This is a full-time contract, but I'm allowed, as long as I meet my targets, to spend as many hours as I need in my business. Now, I'm in the situation where I am running a successful business, employing staff, etc. And I'm publishing regularly in the top journals, bringing in significant grants income. Although I don't, as I said, have a full teaching load at the moment, I do some teaching. Despite ramping up my business, I've never worked more than my contracted hours. And I just recently did a check on this, and I'm still averaging 37 point something hours per week. So the secret of this is something that I want to share in a little bit more depth in a session which we're going to run next week following on from this. And perhaps one of my colleagues from Sussex can put a link in the chat. We are sadly full, but if you're interested, you can join the waiting list for that. Just put it in your diary and we'll contact you on the morning, and hopefully you'll be able to join. But I'll tell you more about this, but in a nutshell, the secret is to focus regularly on priorities that have real meaning for me. And so this is about a regular exercise at the beginning of the week and or at the beginning of each day that creates this positive feedback loop between the sense of meaning, the sense of purpose as I do that thing that I'm really passionate about, and then my focus. and my continued motivation. And so I go into my day with this adrenaline rush, this sense of efficacy. Yes, I'm doing the things that are important, and that powers me through my marking pile, the data analysis, or whatever it is that might be boring me. And I check in again on a Monday morning, which is what I do, to record my podcast, which is what I'm currently doing on my 1 hour per Monday morning before I start my week. But I think one of the critiques that people say is, well, great, Mark, yeah, but this whole metricized, managerialized culture that we all live in now, with the ref and the tef and the kef, it just be measured to death, and it just saps the living daylights out of us. So my answer to this is to come back and to dig deeper into that sense of purpose. And as we'll look at in this deep dive session next week, that sense of purpose comes from a clearer than ever sense of your own professional identities and your values that you can then use to identify these tasks that you can put in to the beginning of your day or week, small amounts of time that regularly connect you with that purpose and then power your motivation and focus. This is about doing impact on your terms. Find impacts, things that you can engage with that will fundamentally, intrinsically motivate you. Don't just do it for the extrinsic incentives because I need a case study or I want promotion or whatever else it might be. And if you do that, you'll avoid the negative unintended consequences that are proliferating as a result of impact. And that's a chance, there's a good chance that you'll have something to show for ref or kef or whatever anyway. So don't start your business because you want to boost your institution's kef metrics. Start a social enterprise that makes virtually no money, but that powers real world impact, and fall in love with your job again. It's about that connection to your purpose that will enable you to do great work, not just power metrics. And you know what, as a result, you might get a few of those metrics as well. On the session next week, I'll go into this in much more depth. And if you want to read more about this, I'll put PDF copies of the 2 books, The Productive Researcher and Impact Culture, and Impact in the Impact Culture book in particular, you can read about goal hierarchy theory, which explains some of the science behind how this connection to your purpose can work. But for now, I'm going to conclude by asking you to challenge yourself. What could you do for half an hour? That's all it takes to create this positive feedback loop on a Monday morning before you start work that would inspire and remotivate you again, whether or not it's impact. And if you're saying to yourself, I can't afford half an hour, and I'm going to ask you to go deeper to ask why not. And what would you say to a colleague who said, I want half an hour per week for something which is one of my own deep core priorities? And speak to yourself the way you would speak to your colleague. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, lots of smiles and nods I can see around the virtual room in response to that. It's great, great stuff. Thank you so much. I love that idea of 30 minutes to reconnect with your purpose and create that positive feedback loop. I think doing that sort of post-bank holidays is a great idea as well, if you don't get a Monday because you've got a bank holiday. So thank you so much. We're going to move into our discussion now. I'm going to be a bit cheeky because I know that way back in the chat, when Norbert was talking, Mark, you posted a couple of questions to Norbert. So we're going to go back to those and they're going to come sort of, hopefully some sort of order, come back to the questions that follow that in the chat. So Mark, you asked Norbert, how do you combine all of these enterprises with your day job? Because there's lots of examples of the dots that you were connecting and some great stuff there. And Mark's question was, are you full-time? Do you have to do this in your spare time? Or does the deal you made with your HOS able to do this as part of your day job? So yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, Norbert.
Yeah, so I am full-time, and I do have a full teaching load. I guess that being a business school, you always have a full teaching load. There's always too many people asking you also to chime in on various projects. So I guess like there's 2 answers to this question. The first one is that for a fair amount of time, and to a degree even today, it's a grind. Yeah, so you do it. You have to do stuff in the spare time on the weekends and so on, and hope that your partner is understanding of that. But yeah, so that's definitely there. Over time, like you, I've also, as I said, sort of become a bit better at trying to sell this, what I'm doing in terms of like what the benefits are for the institution. And there are clear benefits here also, not just on the research side, but also on the teaching side as well, on creating opportunities for graduates in terms of like the networks and so on there. So over time, you can get a bit better at that. So what I have been able to do is negotiate some innovation points on my workload for this sort of things in recent years, but it's not a formalized program. And I'm strongly aware of that, first of all, of how tough it's been for me in the past, but also on that this is not really a path for our sector to really functionally incorporate innovation entrepreneurship in this way. It's just not a good way of dealing with things, so things have to change. And that's why I'm also really keen to drive this project forward to affect a bit of change across the sector, to make it a bit easier on this. And there are, in other countries, things are a little bit further ahead. So if you look, for example, at the US there, and in terms of like to what degree innovation and entrepreneurship, or also engagement with commercialization or enterprise is handled there on people's workload, and how universities are working with staff there, then there is clear evidence in terms of like how much stronger the innovation ecosystem as a whole is there, in terms of like also spin-outs and leading companies being created. And so in the UK, we're a tiny bit behind that, but I think we've got phenomenal potential to catch up on that, and then hopefully we can do that. And these are, by the way, great case studies also from Hibbah and from you on this. So you guys all need to be case studies on this project as well.
Fantastic. So a question from Saskia for each speaker. So Hibbah, I'll come to you this one first, which is, what sort of support, if any, have you had from your institutions? Funding, legal advice, marketing, etc., etc. So thank you, Saskia. I'll send that question to Hibbah first.
So thanks, Saskia. Thanks, Belinda. So for me, I would say it's the training. It was through University of Sheffield that I had the opportunity to go on to the Aspect program, the Success program. And yes, that's what I can say about University of Sheffield. All the rest, we had to funding. When we had that talk about IP, and then, you know, the university said I was free to have this and all that, then I had to get the support from outside. So everything else, I'm doing it outside. But yeah, University of Sheffield supported me to do the training, to understand how this works, and for me to be able to set up a social enterprise. And I did my research there. I still work there at the moment. So that's what I can say. Could I respond to something else, or would you come back to me?
Can I? Yeah, I'll come straight back to you. I'm just going to finish this point, but I'll definitely come back to you. Thanks, Hibbah. So Mark, same question to you. So what support do you get from
actually? So
you're on it.
Maybe Norbert wants to go first, and then if anyone wants to interrogate my answers in the chat, they're very welcome to.
I will get you to just tell me really quickly what's in the chat, just for the benefit of people who are watching the recording rather than joining us live. Very good point.
So yeah, Fast Track Impact's headquartered in Scotland, so we get free business support from the Scottish Government in Scotland, and I am aware that I'm very fortunate to have received that, but that's where I got my advice. I was keen that I wanted to own my own company. I did not want that to be a part owned by my university, with all of the challenges that would come with that. I don't want to be stuck in one university with one set of people now pulling the strings. And so I cheekily set up Fast Track Impact between jobs, and might justify that on the basis that if you look at the papers that are actually the underpinning research for this, these were spread across 3 different institutions. So it wasn't right for me that the most recent one that I happened to be in got all of that credit, when in reality it had given me no support. All I've ever asked for is a bit of flexibility and understanding. So I'll let you make your own mind up as to the ethics and the rights and wrongs of that.
Thank you. So same question to you, Norbert.
So I mean, I guess I must confess I've gotten a little bit of an unfair advantage on here because my discipline is entrepreneurship, and as I sort of said at the start, pretty much the first moment I was in the classroom teaching this, for me it wasn't good enough to just kind of like do the theory, but I needed to have the practical experience of this as well. So over time, I would say I've become definitely an expert in this. And so also because I do advise other companies as well, colleagues and so on. So right now at the moment, I would say that probably I'm more in a position to advise other people than in my university than take advice. But what I do get is a mentorship, I guess, from senior colleagues and so on. And I was very fortunate as well. So I did complete a tech accelerator program which was from O2 Telefonica, highly competitive, a sort of program where I worked 9 months alongside other startups. And that was quite a transformational experience for me because I really got to do my own thing, but also learn from my peer group in terms of other entrepreneurs quite strongly on this. But what I will say at the end of this is I didn't have this at the start and I didn't need it at the start. And all you really need at the start is to make a start. So don't, if you want to do something, don't let yourself be held up and think like, oh, I need to set up, I don't know what company format I need to set up and so on. Give it a go because the rest of the stuff you'll figure out. It's not that complex.
Thanks very much. Hibbah, I said I was going to come back to you, and I am. I know that you have more to share or ask. I don't know if it's more sharing or more questions.
Yes. Belinda, did you say Hibbah? Sorry.
Yes.
Or come and do an entrepreneurship course with us. That's also, of course, always possible. Yeah.
Yes. And I put a comment in the chat box as well. I was just saying that my situation is similar to Max, not in terms of experience or anything, but I was aware that. So I left Sheffield for a position somewhere else, and then I had this postdoctoral fellowship, and I had to come back to Sheffield. So I was going to leave at some point. So I had to have that discussion just so we were clear about it. But then Mark asked me a question in the chat box, and I wanted to respond to that. I'm trying to find it. Yes, you said I'm wondering how you combine all these enterprises with your day job. Are you full-time, or do you have to do this in your spare time, or that's the deal? Yes, so yeah, I'm full-time. I'm a postdoctoral. My research is funded by AXA. And so my line manager is aware that AXA recognizes, they are interested in what you do in the community. And even though I didn't set out to do any of these, I write it in my reports and it's not affecting my work. So, I'm still producing, meeting my targets in terms of my postdoctoral research work outputs. Yes, does that answer your question? So this is like extra stuff. I have to do it weekends and outside of my normal work hours, but really AXA is excited about this and they are funding my research at the moment. Yeah. And then you said that ECS, well, I didn't know that, however, you cannot take an impact case study with you to a new institution, but we've only really have, so this particular TLC project I described, we've just finished a month ago. We submitted 2 abstracts to 2 conferences and we haven't even written the paper. So we're going to get lots more case studies that we can submit to other institutions in the future. If that discussion comes up around that, we cannot submit it elsewhere. Really, we are not worried about it because this is just a beginning for us and we know that we're going to do more. We're going to have more case studies. And as I said, that is not our motivation. We want to support our community. So at the end of the day, yeah, we will document it, and when it fits, we will put it in. Yeah.
Thanks very much. Lorna, I'm going to come to you. I know that you had a question. Oh, sorry, Norbert, you've got your hand up as well. So Norbert, I'll let you respond to that and I'll come to Lorna's question.
Yeah, I just wanted to sort of like on the ongoing debate in terms of setting up companies at P and so on as well. Just wanted to highlight again that there is also a pretty big difference between maybe sort of STEM subjects and shape disciplines in terms of like what the IP is and what the value of the IP is, and certainly sort of in arts, humanities, social sciences, and so on. The value of what I would call sort of sweat equity, so the entrepreneur or possibly the co-founder taking the venture further, is much more important than maybe some than the IP, because it is really much more about the execution and doing things than some residual IP there. And maybe that's not particularly well understood in the university or institutional structure as well, or it's not set up for this type, and something that also maybe needs to be addressed.
Thank you. Lorna, you've got a question, and this is probably going to be our last question, but if anybody's sitting on a question and you want to squeeze it in, put it in the chat and I'll try and get to it. But Lorna.
Thanks, Belinda. Yeah, I was just thinking about, I think different things have come up through the conversation, and I wanted to say that the issue of ownership of IP is certainly one that we don't want to shy away from in the series. But our next conversation we have someone specifically talking about IP and about how to protect that, talking on behalf of the university. But I think we should certainly bring that question in, and it's a very live question, isn't it? If your university isn't resourcing you to work on this, then they're having ownership of the IP is challenging. And also we've got someone talking about business models, and I know there was talk in the chat about what is a community interest company. I think we'd like to go through in a bit more detail. What is a community interest company? How is it different from a social enterprise, etc., etc. So do please join us for the next conversation, which Belinda will talk about later. But my question was about inclusivity, about who's able to do this work, and it is problematic, isn't it, when if you're only able to do this, if you're able to put time into it outside of your working hours, then this is not going to be an option for everyone. This is going to be only suited to those who have childcare options, etc. So how can we change this? What do institutions need to do to better support this activity? And Norbert, I know that's obviously what the Apple project is all about. So it's a bit of a lead, but it'd be good to get everyone's perspective on that, because obviously, Hibbah's been at the coalface and has very cleverly found herself a better arrangement. But it'd be really, really good to get her insight as well, and of course Mark's, but into how this can be made to work for more people, so that we're not expected to do it in our free time. Norbert, do you want to lead off? Because the Apple project obviously speaks directly to this.
Obviously, we've got a whole project that's trying to do something more in there. I think at Sussex, I believe also you currently looking into the creation of an enterprise pathway, which would, for example, be one way how to go about this. Because at most institutions at the moment, you might be on a teaching intensive or a research track, and enterprise sort of like falls in between those two and doesn't have a natural home. So that is one way. I guess looking at promotion pathways and what's being recognized also for your career. That's sort of like one path. The other thing is in workload models on how we can better allocate funding for innovation or entrepreneurship projects. And again, some of this can be done at an institutional level, and maybe some universities will develop a reputation for being very good places for this. I'm currently not aware of someone positioning themselves in this space, but definitely that is something that's up for grabs for universities. But ultimately, it will also have to come from a policy level to a degree from the research councils in terms of, because what's getting measured is getting funded and is getting the weight gets put behind by senior management. So it has to be addressed at multiple levels. Unfortunately, no easy fix straight away, but it is entirely fixable. So hopefully we'll see some change over the next couple of years. And you're absolutely right. I mean, like, yeah, it's it shouldn't be the case that you have to sacrifice things for this. No, it's not good.
Thank you so much for answering that question. As Lorna said, we've got 2 more conversations in the Enterprising Impact Conversation series. The next is on May the 17th, when we're actually looking explicitly at understanding, protecting and harnessing the value of your research. So absolutely building on from the conversation today. And then the final conversation is on June the 14th, which is making it happen, how to define your next steps to greater social value. So that's very much a wrap up. The link to the entire Enterprise Impact Conversation series is now in the chat. If you're watching the recording of this, you can get to that Eventbrite series by https://bit.ly/EI conversations, and you'll be able to see the entire series there. Also, when you get there, you'll also find the link to all the recordings, which are on the EI conversations-videos bit.ly link on YouTube as well. So all of this content that we're sharing with you today and previous conversations, they're all available. Before we close, I just want to say a huge thank you to our speakers, and Charlotte's going to trigger a quick poll, because understanding your experience of these conversations is really, really important to us. So there's 3 questions. So questions 1, 2, and 3. To get to question number 3, you just need to scroll down. So we'll just leave that up there for a couple of minutes. If you could vote on the screen, that would be really helpful. And also just a reminder that further up in the chat is Mark's deep dive, when we're going to be looking at these aspects of how do you combine all the elements of a successful research career. That deep dive, which is later this week rather, is full, but we are running a wait list. So find the link to that further up in the chat. So thank you very much for everybody for completing the poll, which is great to see such positive responses to this conversation, and just to explore a little bit about what impact that these conversations are having on you. So once again, I'll just say another big thank you to Norbert, Hibbah and Mark for joining us for today and sharing your brilliant stories and insights and top tips for everybody else. So thank you for joining, and have a great rest of the week.